Hello, and welcome to this episode of Totally TM, my close call with fame. Who is the most famous person that you have met? For me, the most famous person that I've met is Karl Popper, the science philosopher and theoretician. Now, his theories cover many books, and what I remember was he had a theory of empirical falsification, where empirical falsification meant that if something could be falsified empirically, it would be in the realm of science. Otherwise, it was not in the realm of science. And this became known as the line of demarcation between science and religion, the notion of empirical falsification. Now, I thought this was a pretty important idea to learn about, so I struggled with his books. I picked up a bunch of his books and struggled with those books. And after a while, I became more obsessed, if you will, with the marginalia that I was writing in those books than the ideas in the books themselves. And then after a while with that, I became focused on the kind of writing implement that I was using to write my marginalia. And back then I picked up rapidograph pens, which when they're not clogged, put down deliciously smooth lines, silky smooth lines. And I really like that, so I wrote my marginalia with rapidograph pens, like 0.5 millimeter or 0.3 millimeter rapidograph pens, which meant that I could get a lot of notes, very tinily written in the front cover and in the margins of the books that I was reading. I think in some ways I spent more time unclogging my rapidographs than I did trying to understand Karl Popper's theories. Anyways, fast forward, it's the late 1970s, and I'm now an assistant professor of psychology at the University of Waterloo in Canada. And I'm walking down the hallway and I see tacked to the wall a notice that says Karl Popper is giving a talk at a nearby university. I think it was University of Guelph. And I looked at this notice kind of surprised, and I thought, Karl Popper, he's dead. I associated Karl Popper with Ludwig Wittgenstein and the Vienna Circle in the 1930s. Well, anyways, Karl Popper was not dead. This was about 1978. He was giving a talk at the University of Guelph. So I grabbed a couple of the books that I had, Karl Popper books that I had been dipping into, and I rushed over to hear Karl Popper talk in person. No idea what the talk was about, can't remember a thing about the talk, the topic, or the content, or anything. But I do remember after the talk rushing up to the stage with the other academics, all of whom except me had important philosophical questions for Karl Popper because he was very willing, very open, very welcoming of questions. I got in line, and when my turn came, Karl Popper looked at me and I looked at him, and I said, "Would you sign this book?" And he took the book very slowly. He's then a very old man. He was 76 years old. He said yes. And just as slowly as he took the book, he slowly opened the book to sign it. I handed him a pen. I had a pen with me, not a rapidograph pen, because if I had a rapidograph pen, it probably would have been clogged by then. I handed him just a regular pen, and he noticed my marginalia and decided to read it. And not only was he old, he was hard of seeing. And he started to read my tiny rapidograph notes in the margin of a book that he had written that I had acquired. And when he satisfied himself that my notes made no sense, he signed the book K.R. Popper. which I have to this day. It's now 2019. And he slowly handed the book back to me, and he noticed that I was gripping another one of his books. And his eyes lit up and he said, "Would you like me to sign that one too?" And being polite, I said, "Yes." And meanwhile, the impatience behind me was palpable, it was tangible, as this long string of academics were shifting their weight from one foot to the other and staring at the back of my head. We have questions to ask. What is this autograph stuff? Well, Karl Popper, true to himself, took the second book, opened it to sign it. I handed him the pen again, and he noticed a little more marginalia and proceeded to read it. And of course it was tiny, it was minuscule. Convincing himself that it too was equally as meaningless as the other marginalia, he signed the second book, Karl Popper, and handed it back to me. Thank you. I rushed away from that stage knowing that my irrelevancies meant that nobody would bother with me after that. And the academic line proceeded up to ask their questions of Karl Popper. Now, I no longer use rapidograph pens. I did have a stint with some fountain pens, but they were equally problematic. They clogged all the time, so I never was successful with those either. So I just use regular pens now. Karl Popper died in 1994 at the age of 92 in Vienna. That's where he's buried. And Karl Popper is the most famous person that I have ever met. And this is my close call with fame. Thank you for watching this episode of Totally TM.